Making a thumbnail. All right, let's try to record a video now. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a recent client project that I did from start to finish. Over the summer, I was commissioned to create an illustration that was going to be used on the cover of a sketchbook for the University of Hartford's Hartford Art School low residency Masters of Fine Art program in illustration. How about that for a name? These sketchbooks would be given to students and used as promotional materials to promote the program and recruit new students. The requirements were just to incorporate the program's name, which is just low residency MFA in illustration. So that was simple enough. The only problem was this was a bit of a rush project and I did not have a lot of time to work on it. So I knew I was gonna have to use some tricks and some secret weapons to get it all finished in time. As someone who does a lot of hand lettering, I figured I would use the program's name as like the main focal point to anchor the whole composition. And that would also save me a lot of time because I'm pretty quick and efficient when it comes to hand lettering. I knew I wanted to incorporate some illustrated elements and just fun stuff to go with the lettering, so it wasn't just a lettering composition. But I definitely wanted to avoid going super literal with like illustration tools or pencils and, anything like that. That seemed like total overkill and completely unnecessary. I mean, the target audience for these sketchbooks is illustrators. So I didn't need to create a design that was like, hey, look, these are tools you might use. Isn't that cool? That's not very cool. Instead of overthinking that part, I figured I would just focus on the lettering composition, figuring that the overall shape and size of that would determine what else I could incorporate into the composition. So to get started, the first thing I had to do was figure out what the visual hierarchy would be for the words, like which ones would be the most important thing that I want to stand out. Obviously, the two most important things are MFA and illustration. Both of those things are the main determining factors to figure out if this program is right for you. So if I'm pretending to be the target audience, I might think, am I looking to get my master's degree? Oh, MFA, check. Okay, we're good to go. And I'm an illustrator, so is this for illustration? Oh look, illustration, check. Good to go. The first thing I do is quickly get the words down on the page, roughly by their visual importance. Since MFA is just 3 letters, I knew it would need to be pretty big, so I thought that could work as the focal point. And then illustration could be large below that. And then I figured I could try to sneak in a little small area above where it wouldn't distract from illustration. And then I tried to stack low residency so it could be a little bit smaller. Clearly at this stage, it's super rough and I'm really just sort of trying to figure out loosely the right size and spacing without overthinking it too much. As you can see, I'm not really doing anything with styling here, just trying to get them on the page as sort of like a framework to start with. So the next step for me is to maybe just try to experiment with some different styles. I like doing script lettering, so that's usually one of my go-tos, and I just sort of play around with that and see if maybe that might be an option for this. When I'm doing a type lockup like this, I try to figure out ways that I can fit the words together almost like a puzzle. So I tried to do that here, having in fit into the space above US. And then I just did a bolder overlapping version of MFA. So as I'm working through these iterations, I usually do one and then turn down the opacity, put a new layer on top of that, and then use that original one as a new starting point or like a framework to sort of build upon that and evolve the style and layout a little bit. So for this one, I tried to push the script lettering a little bit more. I was happy with the way the script might work for these two options and to sort of give low residency and illustration a little bit of flair, a little bit of style, and also to differentiate it from MFA. And for the low on top of residency, I also tried to like fit it into that little spot. And then I sort of curve the baseline a little bit on illustration to sort of wrap it to the letters below. And then I decided that in could maybe just be in like a little circle and then stay in that area above the US. I thought that worked out well. But I thought when it was script, it was just getting a little bit lost. And because it's in a slightly non-traditional spot, being not before illustration and sort of like tucked down a little bit, I didn't want it to read weird. So I thought putting it in a little circle would draw your attention to it before you got down to illustration and help you read it a little bit easier. I also noticed that there was some potential for letter connections in the low residency script. So I did a little line connecting the R over to the L and then the bottom of the L curving over and tying into the Y. To balance that out, I made there a little bit of a flourish on the leg of the R coming up underneath, and then adjusted the curve of the F in MFA so it all just sort of fits together nicely It just feels like a nice little cohesive lockup. So at this point, I was feeling pretty confident with this sketch. I liked where it was going, and I knew I was going to incorporate some illustrated elements into the background. And because I was using script lettering, I didn't want it to get difficult to read with things happening behind it. So I decided to make a framework that would kind of build a little barrier around the script lettering so I could have things come up behind it, but it wouldn't interact with the lettering itself. So I just traced around the shape of the script lettering to make a little frame for both the low residency and the illustration portion. And it already starts to feel like I don't know, almost like a logo situation. It's just nice, tight little lockup. Even though it's still rough and loose, I can visualize where this is going to go. I'm feeling pretty good about it. So since I was happy with that overall sketch, I decided I would just take it to the final tightened line work stage. I decided to do this before incorporating the illustration because I thought that since I'm going to have illustrations and objects coming out from behind spots, having this shape locked in would make it easier in case I had to make some adjustments and that would interfere with how the characters worked. Since this is the main focal point, I figured this should be locked in first. So that's what I did. So now that the lettering is all sorted out, I need to figure out what I'm actually going to use for illustrated elements to tie this all together. And I mentioned I didn't want to do like the typical illustration supplies or things like that. So I thought about what would I want to see on a little sketchbook promoting a program that I might attend. I should say that I did actually attend this program, and I actually teach a class in this program in the summers. So there's that. If you're interested in being in one of my classes in real life and you're interested in your MFA, you can join this program. So I thought, like, what would I want on a sketchbook? And for me, I would just want some cool stuff. I just want some fun little playful things to maybe make me laugh or make me inspired to draw some weird stuff myself. That's what I like. So I figured, hey, I was once the target audience for this, and I like weird, fun little stuff. So I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to put some weird little characters and funny little things, maybe some little weird abstract shapes, just have some fun with this and go with that. The problem is the whole bunch of different things to come up with, and this was a tight deadline. So to get this all done in time, I had to use a little bit of a secret weapon. And what is that secret weapon, you may ask? Well, I was going to steal from myself. I'm going to steal from myself, not copy other people. I'm not a savage, not a maniac, I'm not a lunatic. If you're familiar with this channel or my work, you know that I did a daily drawing project for many, many, many years. And one of the benefits of that is just an archive of illustrations that I just did for fun and for personal work. And even though I'm not doing the daily drawing project anymore, I'm still always doing personal work and always drawing. I think that is crucial to maintaining an illustration career, is to always be doing personal work. And I've talked about that in some other videos that you should check out. I'll put a link in the description to some. So here's the stuff I gathered. We got some fun little faces, characters, got a little green guy or yellow guy giving a peace sign, got a skull. Always got to have a skull. Skulls are always something that I want to see, thing that I like. Think that might be a duck. I'm not sure. I don't know what some of these things are, but there's a cloud with a face. I like that. There's a wiener looking guy, another guy waving, just some fun little stuff. So using those as a starting point, I sort of roughed them into the composition and then made some abstract shapes and other stuff, like some hands and just other weird faces and doodled lines and wiggles to just sort of tie it all together and just wrap a sort of framework around the lettering. So I kept it really loose at this point just to sort of quickly frame it in. When I'm doing this kind of thing, I'll sort of start in one spot and then move to another spot and just keep like adding things so that it's balanced. I don't like start in one area and work my way around. It's like do a little up here and then balance it with stuff down here. Then maybe go up to this top corner and then sort of just fill in the different things and make sure it's evenly spaced. Make sure there's not just like a ton of faces over here and like none over here. And then, you know, maybe there's some like bursty, explosion-y lines over here. So maybe balance some over here. Just sort of make it balanced, if you will. So this is the thing that I sent off to the client to get approval. Typically, I would do the whole thing as a loose sketch, but because it was helpful in my process to do the lettering treatment a little bit tighter, and it didn't take me that much time, I decided to, you know, send it off with tight lettering, but with the loose sketch in the background. So I sent this off, they were happy with it. So I kept moving forward. I tightened it up and did the final line work from that. And I followed it pretty closely, but again, I'm just tweaking it a little bit as I go and sort of pushing things to make sure that they line up nicely and sort of fit within the overall shape and sort of flow together with the lettering. I decided to pull some of these characters up on top of the framework for illustration, but still gave it enough room so that it wouldn't compromise the legibility. Made the skull eyes hearts just to, make it a little less aggro since it was in the top left corner of the composition. It's like that vibe. It's like, I'm badass, but I also love stuff. So the next step is color. And color for me can be stressful sometimes. Sometimes it comes together easy and sometimes it is a nightmare. And I didn't have time to stress about this, so I had to just sort of dive in. So for me with coloring, I usually like to find a starting point. And for this, I knew that the University of Hartford's color was red. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me use red as the starting point, as like the focal point, and then we can sort of work from there. I also thought because this was like a jumble, I imagined it being kind of colorful and we have like this bright red. So I thought maybe the sketchbook could be black. I think that would really stand out. I feel like you don't see a lot of black covers for these kind of things. And so it would also make the bright colors really pop off of the black. Also, I think black is kind of cool. So to get started with this, I made a black layer in my file, but then I turned down the opacity a bit so I could still see the line work on top of that. But I also didn't want to just leave it blank because having just a blank white background would sort of make it hard to tell how the colors were going to look against that dark background. So again, since the type lockup is the main focal point, I figured I would just start with that, get that colored in, and then I could do the illustrateds based on that. So I colored MFA in red to match the school's color. And then I was like, okay, let me get another color in here. And I picked a blue that I really like to use. And blue, really makes red pop. They sort of vibrate and bounce off of each other. So I thought that was a good way to add some energy to the overall composition. And I knew I was going to need white for like the eyeballs and stuff like that. So I figured I would do low residency and in white, sort of tie those two together. And now we've got three colors to start with. We got the white, we got the red, and the blue. So when I'm doing this kind of thing, I try to be minimal with colors. Like I know my work is very colorful, but if you like count the colors, there's really not that many. And my process when I'm doing something like this, where there's a lot of different things, is often to just start with like two colors and then just use them as much as I can and then add colors as needed. I don't know why, but I like to keep things minimal and not introduce colors unless they're needed. So I tried to work the red, white, and the blue into the background, just evenly spread out in as many areas as I could, and just sort of get a balanced overall look. So at this point, I needed to introduce another color. And I couldn't stop thinking about that octopus in the bottom right. I did those like red tentacles, and I was like, well, if this octopus is going to have red tentacles, he probably needs to be pink or something like that. And I thought, pink goes nicely with red. Pink would be a good color here. It also look good on a black background. So let's just do some pink. So I grabbed pink and just colored in, a balanced amount of stuff evenly spread out throughout the composition. I was like, okay, this is looking pretty good, but I think we need something that's a little bit different. So instead of just like randomly picking a color, I thought, well, what would work well with these colors here? And I thought, well, I did something that worked with the red here. How about yellow, as it will complement the blue? And we've got some bursts and we have a lightning bolt coming out of the cloud. So, we obviously need a yellow here. This is crucial. So I went in, put in a bunch of yellow, spread it out evenly, and things are starting to come together. And at this point, I start to think, okay, do I need another color or can I make do with what I have here? And I probably could get it done with these colors here, but I wanted to add another. So I introduced purple. I thought I had a bunch of bright colors. I thought purple would be something that would add some variety. It's also a combination of red and blue. So that's a nice, situation there. And it was sort of like a middle ground between the black. So it was like, it would give a little bit of depth being darker. So spread the purple around, thought this was looking pretty good. And I still felt like I might need one more color. And it was a little bit of a struggle because I was like, there is kind of quite a few colors here, but you know what? YOLO, let's get another color. So I looked around at what we had here and I was like, all right, we got a monster in the bottom. Then we got like a drippy face. There's a bird and then just some random lines. So I thought, well, for the last color, I used purple, which is a combination of the red and blue. Why don't I do green, which is a combination of the blue and yellow, to sort of make this all a little bit more cohesive. So I put in the yellow, turned the background up 100% since everything was filled in so I could view it all in its glory. And I was like, okay, this feels pretty good. I like this. I think the green is a nice touch, but the color is evenly spread out and it just feels balanced. And, you can still see the important stuff. I think having that bold sort of 3D shadow type situation on the MFA really lets that stand out and be a focal point. I think the white framed low residency sort of draws you in and it all sort of flows together nicely. At least I think so. I think it does. You can tell me if you don't think it does. So I was pretty happy with how this turned out, but I thought it felt a little flat and maybe just needed a little bit of something extra. So I thought maybe I'd play around with some texture just to give it a little bit of grit, since I was using a brush to do the line work that I had a little bit of grit. This is the Retro Supply Co. Classic Inker that I really like using. So it's a simple line that has some subtle pressure sensitivity, but it's just got like a grit that makes it feel analog. If you're interested in checking out this brush, it's in their liner set. And I have an affiliate link below, so if you purchase the brush through that link, you're helping out the channel a little bit. Isn't that nice? So I thought I'd play around a little bit of texture to tie into that line work. And I just, went in with some subtle grit to sort of, I used it as a little bit of a separation between the letters and like the MFA here, and some shape for the cloud. I did mostly some black texture, but also a little bit of like blue and colored stuff within the clouds, just to sort of roughen it up a little bit and make it feel a little warmer, a little more printmaky. I did this texture using some of the texture brushes in the Woodland Wonderland set from Retro Supply Co. Again, affiliate link below. So I sent the cover comp off, and the client was happy with it, and they told me that I needed to do the back cover for this sketchbook. And I thought, oh, I wasn't thinking about that. Let's see what we can do, because again, time was ticking and it needed to happen quickly. I knew that I needed to incorporate the logos for the school and the program. So I got those situated on the back cover. So I was like, okay, maybe I can continue some of these wiggly lines from the main composition. So I brought those over onto the back and just sort of made a frame around the logo and the URLs. I also used those squiggles to sort of make a frame around the logo and the URLs so that those could have some breathing room and be easy to read. These are important things that the people who are going to get this will need to get more information about the program. So I wanted to give them plenty of breathing room. I didn't want to go too complicated with the back. So I just sort of continued some weird random doodles. When in doubt, I draw a piece of pizza. So we got a piece of pizza in there, and then I was like, oh, let's draw a face that's excited about the pizza. And then I thought I would just put a little quote on here that sort of tied together my thought process for coming up with this idea, which is just like, make stuff and have fun, which is my sort of, what's the word? Mantra? Is that the word? My mantra. Yeah, I give a mantra. My mantra is make stuff, have fun. Anyway, put that on there. Decided to keep color super minimal for the back. And then I thought, we'll get a little pointer, a little hand pointing to the fun. So I sent this off. It was approved. Very easy back and forth on this project, which was nice when you have a tight deadline and the client is very easygoing with your work. That is very helpful and very nice. So oftentimes at this point, I will just send over my artwork and then they will deal with the production, but they needed me to get this print ready. So they gave me the information for the vendor that would be producing these sketchbooks. And I went on their site and downloaded their template that you would use to make sure that my file types were set up the way that they need them to be. So this is the template that I downloaded. Here you'll see we've got some different lines here. There is the bleed area, and then there's an area that they call the quiet area. So the bleed area is area that goes beyond the area that's going to be printed. And in this spot, you want to continue your artwork so that when things get cut, there's a little bit of wiggle room. And this is especially important when you have things that go off the edge of the page or you have a colored background. So for my design, it's a black cover. If I didn't provide a bleed and this got cut and there was a little bit of a margin of error, we might get a white sliver that would look terrible. So when you provide a bleed, it prints it larger than it needs so that when it cuts, there's a margin of error so that you don't have any weird spots, any just plain paper areas or things getting cut off strangely. And that ties in with what they're calling the quiet area. And this is just an area that's about a 1/4 inch from the edges that they say that you should not put any important information there because this could potentially get cut into a little bit. So you want to make sure all of your important stuff is within that white area and then make sure that your artwork extends into the outermost rectangle so that there's room. And that's called the bleed. So typically when you're doing a cover, oftentimes they will be one file, but in here they wanted the front and the back separately. So I had to do 2 files. No big deal. So I placed the cover into this template here, and then I turned down the opacity of the template so that I could see my artwork below it and check to make sure it was working properly. So nothing important goes beyond the safe area, so we are good in that regard. And then I just extended the black area a little bit further. Going into this, I knew I was gonna need a little bit of a bleed, so my original artwork was a little bit bigger anyway, which maybe I should have mentioned earlier when I did this, but I didn't want it to get confusing. So I apologize. If you're like, you're telling us now? The front cover was all set, so I cropped this down. So it included everything we needed. You'll see the lines that go onto the back cover carry into the bleed area. And then I turned off the template because the template is just there for helping you to get your file ready. So I deleted the template and saved the front cover. So I placed the back cover into the template as well, made sure that everything fit properly, made sure there was enough bleed. Everything was good, no issues there. So I deleted that template and saved the file and then sent it off to the printer. And the only thing left to do was to send my invoice, which is always a struggle for me. I don't know why. I like getting paid. I just hate doing paperwork. But anyway, here's the sketchbook. Pretty neat. Pretty happy with how they turned out. Fun little almost pocket-sized sketchbook. People seem to like them. What do you think? You like these sketchbooks? Let me know in the comments if you like my sketchbook. Hopefully this was helpful information to you. If you thought so, maybe you can go ahead and smash my likes, tap my thumbs, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bells, ring my bells. I haven't said this stuff in a while. Good talk. Thank you.